and welcome to Ressun ID, your parliamentary election panel. My name is Mila, and I'm one of your hosts today. I'm very excited to have all you 7 amazing panelists here today to discuss EU politics with young people.
Welcome from me as well. My name is Veera Ollikainen, and I'm your second host today. To start off the panel, I would like to also welcome our lovely panelists, as well as our audience. And I would like to call onto the stage my wonderful colleague, Student Council Chairperson, Veera Ollikainen. Welcome to give a short speech.
Dear students, staff, and honorable panelists, I'm pleased to welcome everyone to the Ressun ID EU election panel. First and foremost, I want to thank all of our Student Council members for their contributions, especially our hosts, Mila and Veera Ollikainen, for their undying efforts and attention to this panel. Ressun has had a long-standing tradition of organizing panels for presidential, parliamentary, and European Parliament elections. This is the first of hopefully many panels organized and hosted completely by the IB line. The elections for the EU Parliament are held on the 6th through 9th of June. As an international school, our values are diverse. We learn much of each other and have a unique school culture. We value different types of traditions and cultures and aim to connect despite our diversity. I'm proud to be a student at Ressun IB and to be a part of our community. Internationality has always been important to me and to many IB students, and I hope that in the future Finland would be the type of nation to embrace internationality and diversity. Some wise man some long time ago said, "Kerran ressu, aina ressu." It connects us all as students of this school, regardless of when we studied here. This ideology translates well to EU policy. We're stronger as a group than we are on our own. Last but certainly not least, I want to thank all of our panelists for coming and that we can hear your opinions and values in regards to EU policy and hear your answers to questions that are important to us youth. We've gone through tremendous efforts to book all of today's panelists and to organize an interesting panel for all. So without further ado, let's begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Veera, so much for your excellent speech. Next, we will move to the panel itself.
First, some brief instructions. We will indicate the time given for each question, and our wonderful Lucas Lassila will ring the bell when your time is up. Please wrap up your response when you hear the bell. And then in order to get through as diverse a group of topics as possible, not all panelists will be able to answer each question. If you have a comment for another panelist's response, please signal to one of us hosts, and we may grant you the floor for 20 seconds.
Now, we would like you, the panelists, to introduce yourself. So, please tell us your name, the party you are representing, and your favorite thing to do in your free time. So, everyone can now answer, and let's start from Dan, and let's go to Pinja. Thank you.
Thank you. Is this on?
Perhaps you can get the microphone.
Yeah. Let's try here. Technical issues.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, now you can hear me. Excellent. So yeah, my name is Dan Cederlöf. I am from the Swedish People's Party in Finland, and my favorite thing to do during my free time is probably listening to music. That's my favorite thing.
Yep, this seems to work. Hi everyone, I'm Atte Harjanne. I'm representing the Green Party, where I'm a member of the Parliament, and at the moment my favorite pastime is sleeping. Because I have a little baby at home and I don't get too much of that, so if I get to choose what I do, then I sleep. But otherwise, reading sci-fi and watching sci-fi series.
Hello, everybody.
everybody. My name is Timo Kaunisto and I represent the Finnish Centre Party. What is my main hobby on free time? I like to play football and I also have a farm. That's a lot of things to do. But I also like to read political history and books about political history.
Hello, I'm Eija-Riitta Korhola, representing Ressun Democrats. In my past I have had some exciting hobbies like parachuting or weightlifting, but nowadays it's a bit more boring. Gardening, playing with grandchildren, no, that's not boring. And reading.
Hi everyone, my name is Mila and I'm representing the National Coalition Party. And I would say that my favorite hobby right now is playing piano.
Hi everyone, my name is Veera Ollikainen. I am representing the Social Democrats, SDP. I'm the vice chair of the Social Democratic Students. And my favorite thing to do on my free time at the moment is probably going to museums with the museum card.
Hello everybody, oh, is this on? Okay, let's see if this works. So, hello everybody, I'm Pinja Vuorinen, I'm from the Left Alliance Party and also the chairperson of the Left Youth of Finland and also an alumni of this high school from the national side, and exactly 10 years ago I was also part of organizing a Euro-parliamentary panel in here, so it's very great to be here. And on my free time, my favorite thing to do probably is karaoke.
Okay, great. The next question is,
As a warm-up round, we would like to see how well you know each other and each other's parties. So starting from Pinja and referring to the panelists on your right, so that Dan is last, could you in 30 seconds please highlight one aspect of your neighbor's party's EU program that you appreciate? So Pinja, one aspect of ICT's EU party program.
Well, I have to say I don't remember the party program word to word. I'm not actually even sure if it's been published, but I know for us as left parties, we are always fighting for the rights of workers, and I think it's very important to highlight that the EU is actually a very important place for that. A lot of laws regarding workers' rights are actually done on the EU level, so I really hope that we can work together with SDP on those in the future as well.
Thank you. If you can't find something from the party program itself, something that your parties share and that could be grounds for cooperation. Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate how the Coalition Party likes to promote companies to tackle issues like climate change. I really appreciate that.
I'm so sorry. We actually come from the same EU group, EPP, and I would say that I really appreciate how the Christian Democrats have always highlighted the importance of families and children.
Thanks. His Centre Party is very devoted in protecting food production in Europe and hoping to be all over, also in Finland inhabited everywhere. They are my values too.
Yes, thank you. Maybe I have a bit advantage because I have a Green politician as a wife, and that's why I know a little bit about the Green Party's programs. But I value very much Green Party's rural policy. They have a good paper on rural politics, and we have a lot of common with the Centre Party in the rural main issues, but not all.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Timo. As regarding Dan and Swedish party, I would say that that kind of protecting and driving for market-based mechanisms as a policy tool is something that I think we have in common, and where I see that your party has a good position.
Thank you, and as it comes to the left, I'm guessing I'm commenting there. I would say probably the regard of human rights and fighting for human rights and international treaties.
Thank you very much. It's nice to see and hear how you find elements that you appreciate in each other's party programs and in your work. When it comes to the mics, perhaps you could share the ones that seem to be functioning slightly better. Apologies for the technical issues with them.
Exactly. And for the next question, we would like to hear Pinja and Eija-Riitta. So, the turnout rate for voters in EU elections has been lower than in any other national elections. Therefore, how would you encourage people to become interested in EU politics and perhaps vote in this June in the EU election?
Pinja, please go ahead and begin.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think the most important thing to highlight, especially for me, engaging young people is very important, especially young people are not voting in these elections, is that we are fighting for the same things that we are fighting on a national level, all as on the city level. We are fighting against climate change, against the climate crisis. We are fighting for justice, fighting for equality, fighting against fascism rising in Finland and in Europe. And I think if you care about these issues, you care about these issues in Finland, then you should also care about them in the EU level and vote in these elections as well.
The EU elections are actually the most important elections in Finland because we have given so much power to European Union, and they have competence on many different political areas. Also things that are very important to younger people, like our environment.
Thank you. You can comment, Dan. Go ahead.
Okay, well, it's not a comment too, but it's just a general. One of my friends pointed out that the timing of the EU election is also not really optimal for young voters, as it comes just during the time of summer break.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a very good point. But I'm sure that we can make it regardless.
Yes. And to continue, to Fiona, with a question that looks at the European Union that you would want to represent in the future.
Yes, this question we would like all of you to answer. This time starting in the middle with Eija-Riitta and moving left so that Timo answers last. Describe in 3 words the EU that you want to work towards. So perhaps 3 adjectives or 3 words.
I'm very slow in these things, but I think justice, internal market, functioning internal markets, and environmental protection.
Okay, I will only highlight one thing, and the most important thing I think is to make sure that Iraq will be safer. We have now war in Iraq, in Ukraine, and I think that's the thing that we have to work on.
I want to work on a responsible and democratic EU. Responsible when it comes to the environment, when it comes to human rights, and when it comes to social justice.
I want to work towards a just, equal, and sustainable EU.
I want to counteract the current trend of deglobalization. I think EU plays an important role in that.
I would go for ecologically sustainable, prosperous, and in general a force for good democracy, liberty, and human rights in the world.
Yes, I would like to address the level playing field for everybody in all conditions and all different conditions in the EU, and also those republic values, democratic values as we have in Finland. I think they should be all over Europe.
Thank you. I'm very impressed with how diverse a group of adjectives and words and sentiments you were able to bring out. The next section we come to is our yes, no answer section. In front of you, you have some brackets with a red and green side. So to answer yes, please show the green side, and to answer no, please show the red side. And now to Misa with our first statement.
Yes, our first statement is Finland should take more active role in the EU.
I see we're very much agreed on this.
Great. Next one. Ukraine should be accepted as a EU member state. There is one. Do you want to comment, Eija-Riitta?
Well, you didn't say anything about time frame.
Yeah.
Of course, it must be accepted, but only when the criteria are fulfilled, and we shouldn't hasten these things because it would downgrade the very nature of EU. We have seen many times that too fast, too rapid action is not good in the end.
Really short. Go on.
This is also a huge question for the European agriculture policy as well.
Thank you. Third question, which is actually from Ressun Lukio. Just to give a credit, great question. The EU should increase military aid to Ukraine. We are really much agreeing. Yes, Pinja, do you want to comment?
Yes, I also want to highlight that not also in regards to military aid, we really have to look, because generally right now, even the EU rules does not really give a lot of leeway to that, on how to do that, and I think altogether just to work on how that will be done, what kind of rules will be made, will be incredibly important in the upcoming years.
Thank you so much. Next one. The EU should take on more collective debt when the previous stimulus package runs out. Now we can see many colors, and if Atte wants to start with a short comment.
Rather, I would see strengthening EU budget, but if EU is not able to act on the challenges it faces now, because our debt is a smaller bad than being ineffective in countering certain challenges facing the EU now.
Thank you. If no one else wants to comment, we can continue.
Yes, the next statement is the European Union should have joint defense forces. Have a moment to think. Okay. Veera, would you like to comment? You're on the edge.
Yes, I don't think like a joint collective army is the way to go, but more cooperation between national armies and NATO should be encouraged.
Okay, thank you. And Pinja?
Yes, I would also like to quickly add, I think in the current situation, especially with the United States being quite unstable, we need to work on common European cooperation on defense, even though most of the member states are also NATO states, and we really need to work on what the Lisbon Treaty 42.7 article means, and again, an important thing for the upcoming years.
Thank you very much. Then moving to the next statement. EU's jurisdiction and decision-making power in comparison to nation-states should be reduced. Okay, we have Timo and Eija-Riitta with green. Would Timo like to comment on this?
I was meaning to show the red lights, but I saw the green lights. But this is a very difficult question. There are areas I'd like to reduce the EU effect, and there are areas that I'd like to add. So this is complicated.
Yeah, I think
it is complicated indeed. But very often I have noticed when I'm former MEP, and I have been leading those trialogues with 3 different bodies, and I have noticed that very often the problem of the EU, the Commission and the Parliament is that they don't have to care how to implement, but the Member State have to take care of the implementation, and that's the difficult part.
Thank you.
Now we will move to a longer answer section. Lucas will ring a bell after 1 minute has passed, but please try to keep
your answers within the 1 minute. The first theme is the European Union and foreign powers.
As European Union, China and USA are the world's 3 largest trading partners, how should the EU respond to China's growing role in the global market? And we would want to hear Atte, Maria and Timo.
Alright, so specifically China. Of course, China is an authoritarian state, and it's important that the EU takes care of its own competitiveness as an EU and is stronger than its member states, so kind of joining forces with member states to be able to play levelly on this geo-economic competition, and I think also de-risking certain dependencies from China, not a complete decoupling, but de-risking, and this also highlights the importance of doing cooperation with other countries, third countries, and also Southeastern Asian countries, for example, to de-risk value chains and production lines, but de-risking and making sure that we are a competitive economy in ourselves.
Thank you. Timo or Maria? Yeah.
I think one of the main things is to keep our competitiveness good, and I would say that we have a huge problem in EU with regulation. I think we have been regulating our companies too much. And the second thing would be to have more cooperation with other countries, for example, India and Africa.
So I would like to look at this more from the crisis management or the self-sufficiency way. Of course, we have to have a lot of exports with those foreign countries mentioned here, also with China. But there are special areas that we must take production more and more into our own hands. And one of them are medicines, other ones are microchips and some other special technologies. As well as we can see, for example, in the fertilizers production and some chemicals that are very useful or very important in the agricultural production, which is the main crisis management thing in the whole Europe in the future.
Thank you very much. Maybe moving a little bit now to EU-US relations. This question is addressed to Veera as well as Eija-Riitta. In 2022, US President Joe Biden signed an Inflation Reduction Act, providing funding to decarbonizing the production sector. The act intends to drive forward the global green energy economy. Should the European Union take more joint debt to match the Inflation Reduction Act from the United States? Veera, go ahead.
I must admit that this is a very complicated question for me. So I don't know a clear answer to this, but like on principle, yes to everything that is like working towards decarbonization and tackling climate change.
Would you perhaps suggest something, a different type of approach than taking joint debt then?
Cooperating on when it comes to reaching these common goals, which are like climate change.
Thank you.
I have to say I don't believe in joint debts because it very often leads to inefficient actions, and this is what we have seen with the recovery fund. It's very difficult to verify and take care of the quality of the deals. I believe more on market-based mechanisms in decarbonizing.
Thank you. Pinja, did you have a comment on this?
If I could just quickly highlight, I think something very important when discussing the IRA in this context is that is actually an answer to the European Green New Deal that was made before. So I think the EU has made already good steps towards this, and actually the US is following us on this, and we can go forward from there. So I think that is important to highlight. We are not just responding to the US, but the US is looking at the EU and what we are doing already.
Thank you. Short comments to Timo.
As Eija-Riitta, I don't believe in common debt, but there are some other things we could use like funding elements, and we have a banking system also in Europe that could be capitalized more for this region.
Thank you. The world is facing concerning trends in increase of armed conflicts. Therefore, what should be the role of the EU in responding to conflicts outside its borders? And we would like to hear Dan, Veera, and Maria.
Well, one important thing that I think the EU has a big part in is to keep others accountable, but still respecting the international treaties that we have. If we don't like them, then we need to change them and not just break them apart, because they are a big fundamental part of how the whole globalized society works. And it's a fact that within the EU we are very slow at sort of meeting these production requirements for ammunition and just self-reliance when it comes to defense. EU has to become better in their defense spending and decision making.
Thank you. Veera, Maria, who would like to start?
Could you please repeat the question, please?
Of course. So, what should be the role of the EU in responding to conflicts situations outside its borders?
Yes, I think the EU should take a stronger role in like standing behind our own values, which are peace and justice and human rights. And when it comes to conflicts happening outside of our borders, I think we should take a stronger role in promoting peace there and fostering and like seeking for ways that can help achieving peace there. For example, the situation in Palestine at the moment.
I think the ideal situation would be that we had the possibility to take a more stronger position, but at the same time we have a war here in Europe that we haven't had like any power to solve, and I would think it will be a really hypocrite to say that we can influence other wars that are happening more far from here, but of course EU has we can like bring like diplomacy, which have been always the strongest thing that EU has always managed.
Thank you so much. Okay, great answers, thank you. Let's then move on back to Fiona with a question about environmental policy.
For many EU parliamentary terms, there has been debate surrounding EU nature and biodiversity policy. Mainly the question of whether legislative conservation of nature and EU countries' ability to make use of their natural resources are in conflict. So Atte and Eija-Riitta, what type of nature policy should Finland pursue in the EU?
This is one of the most important questions in the end. I would say that actually the Nature Restoration Act it had the kind of construct of the right kind of tool, where each of the member states have their role and kind of quote on what they have to do, and then they find the best ways to do that. But you have to have clear area-based targets in order for things to happen. We know that the member states have been not been successful in achieving the targets of previous biodiversity conventions, and now we have the new one in Montreal. So I think this kind of idea where you have a set of targets, a clear scheme, but then the member states have their way on making the most effective ways to get to those targets on national level. That's the right kind of structure for this kind of policy.
So these two concepts are not in conflict.
Well, to some extent, of course, they are in the end. I mean, extracting natural resources takes its toll on nature, but of course we have to find the right kind of balance there, and that boils down to protecting big enough areas and ecosystems for these to exist in balance.
Thank you. Eija-Riitta.
I very much want to defend our own sovereignty. on deciding these kind of issues. And for instance, nowadays the forestry issue is the most topical. It belongs to our competence, deciding on our forestry, and it's very important because our bioeconomy is also the thing that gives solution to environmental problems, because it's renewable source and it can really replace almost all the critical raw materials. So I don't support the idea that we should restore our forest into carbon sinks too much, because we have to be able to develop this area. It's really promising.
Okay, Pinja, you had a comment first.
Yes,
and then come to Timo.
Just quickly comment on that. I think treating forests as something simply under national sovereignty is quite, I'm sorry, foolish is the only word I'm finding, even though I don't want to say you're fool for that, but because forest, if we think about the Amazon forest, if we think about the Russian forest, these are all the lungs of our planet, and so are the forests within us. So we cannot only decide on these kind of questions within our national borders, because what would we do if everyone decided to act like that? We would have no more air.
Thank you. Timo, would you still like to comment?
Yes, this is a very, very good question and very important question. I think the Restoration Act is a good example where European Union goes far too far and goes into our forests and our natural resources in a way that doesn't belong to the EU at all. There is a system that could be decided in EU, but not those very tiny details that they are making in Brussels. Like in the Restoration Act, they tell us that we should freeze, yes I know, the nature to 1950s state. And it's not possible. Nature is not acting like this. It's also always seeking for a new equilibrium and a state. It's not able to have it as a state of 1950.
Okay, yes, after one last small comment.
The final form of the Restoration Act does not make this certain reference to a year. So there's a lot of misinformation. A lot of misinformation on this topic, so please sure to be critical of the sources you're reading.
Yes, thank you for your answers. We understand that the concern and the question is very difficult and it's very divisive as well, but that's what panels are for, and thank you for your answers. And I know this is an important question for a lot of young people, and many of us here, so thank you.
Likewise, as this is a panel held by young people, these questions, especially like a moment like this, are extremely important. And the role of the European Union in safeguarding of the well-being of young people is also an important question. Fiona, would you like to move on?
Yes. The EU has adopted a youth strategy that is active between the years 2019 and 2027. Can you please tell us one key aspect of the youth strategy that you would progress in your work as a member of the European Parliament? Pinja, Maria, Timo, and Dan, we would like to hear what aspect of the EU youth strategy you would focus on.
I can start by saying that I actually do not know the EU youth strategy by heart or could pinpoint any of these certain points, and I think that is an example of how far away the EU often is from young people, even those that are politically active. I also see that in my organization or with the other organizations and young people I meet. I think it's important to note that young people are also just not a separate part of society, but all the kinds of EU decisions that are made, whether it be climate, whether it be economy, workers' rights, migration, all of these also affect young people. And I often think that like treating young people as a separate group that is not linked to these questions can also be harmful occasionally, but something not in regards to the youth strategy, but in regards to youth, I would like to highlight is of course the question of mental health. That is very important here in Finland and in EU in general. I think these are tied to climate, tied to the economy, and a very practical example I would like to highlight would be the banning of unpaid internships that is now ongoing in the EU.
Thank you.
Sorry, I think the worst things that we could do now is to make all the internship illegal in EU, because we have to remember that getting an internship, for example, in Southern Europe is now really hard, and if we make it illegal to have unpaid internship, it will be even harder. But I will highlight definitely mental health, and the second is our economy, because our GDP hasn't been growing for many years, and that's a huge problem for our future.
Thank you. Perhaps Timo.
Yes, I must admit that I'm not familiar with this youth strategy of the EU, but I would like to address hope. I would like to address brighter future, equal possibilities between the generations, and steady future.
Well, yeah, I have to admit as well, I'm not too familiar with the youth strategy, but I would say a general respect towards young people should be sort of realized in the EU. It's an EU-wide problem, actually a global problem, this demographic transition to older demographies, and this leads to of course a smaller population supporting a larger population, which well is very hard to keep sort of standing, and we don't speak about this enough, in my opinion, in the EU and in Finland as well, and give the respect to young people that, hey, you really are the people who are going to sort of support this really big structure, and realize that you're all very important.
Thank you. I think very poignant points, and respect, future, and an ability to find perhaps a summer job or an internship, which I think affects many of us here who have perhaps struggled this summer to find something interesting or that we would be passionate and able to do. But thank you for your point.
Thank you, exactly. And to continue, TikTok has recently been a lot in the news surrounding a talk of the possibility of a wide EU ban of the app. So, should the EU introduce a legislation banning TikTok in all EU member states? And for this question, we would like to hear Atte and Timo.
Yeah, well, I'd be personally happy to see that. I have no problem with that, but to be honest, I think it's a more nuanced question. I think that rather than pinpointing this one, that there's a Chinese aspect here. That's one of the kind of risks. But what's the core problem is actually very dubious use of data, collecting and use of data, and also algorithmic kind of very algorithms that are very addictive. So I think this is an issue that should be looked more broadly and not just focusing on TikTok. I think it partly misses the point, but I think it's a very important question of how to regulate social media platforms so that they're transparent and democratic enough. But I do think that there's some regulation to be put in place, but we should be talking more broadly than just about TikTok.
I think Atte had almost a perfect answer for this, so I don't have much to put forward here, but it's also a question about a free media, free speech, and this is a big thing as a value, as a right. But I see TikTok quite hazardous for the democracy right now, and I would vote for yes, but there are always very, very big questions how to rule this, how to have it all over the Europe. It's very difficult.
Thank you. A short comment, Eija-Riitta.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that TikTok could be classified as part of the grey war. We know that there is hot war, cold war, and grey war, which is a lot to do with disinformation and and hacking and things like artificial intelligence. And what I would like to say in spite of this thing is that many young people really don't know that they funny little dances on TikTok provide information to China in form of recognizing faces. So they get very much material for that.
Great, thank you. And now moving on to immigration policy.
Yes, children and youth form the largest percentage of the global population. 90% of these children and youth currently live in the global south, which due to prevailing conflicts and the climate crisis is becoming increasingly difficult to live in. Immigration is a huge topic in the EU and in Finland. It will likely also be on the table for the next European Parliament. So we would like to ask Veera, Atte, and Maria, what type of immigration policy do you think it is most important for the EU to pursue? Perhaps Veera, you could begin.
Yes, so what type of immigration is the most?
What type of immigration policy do you think is most important for the
Yes.
EU to pursue?
I think EU should pursue for like joint common immigration policies, because this is not an issue of one member state alone. This is like a common thing that we need to be responsible of all type of immigration and finding like common ways of being welcome.
Yeah, I think, well, of course you have, immigration is a lot of things. It's immigration seeking for labor, better quality of life. There are refugees running from war, conflict, or other things, and then you have the hybrid influencing part also, and these get a bit mixed, the refugee mechanism is used for other as well. So I think that the key here is what Veera was saying, that we should have a shared and joint approach, because that means that then probably we're stronger together in forming a policy where we need immigration, and I think EU has a role in providing safe haven and shelter for refugees, but also countering using these mechanisms in order to destabilize EU. So I think the joint shared pacts here are really, really important. And also at the same time, I think EU has a very important role globally in tackling the root causes for refugee, where refugees come from. So I think that's kind of one thing that should be kept in mind all the time, also in the debate.
I think that the joint immigration policy would actually be really hard, because we have so many member states, and each member state have really different approach regarding immigration. I think the most important thing is now to foster our border controls, because that's the huge problem that we have now. And I have to say that I don't want to be living in Europe where we are like, okay, we have to close all the borders, nobody can come here. Of course, we need immigration also, but then there's also immigration that we don't need. But I think this is not the thing that we can solve in EU level, because there's like member states like Poland and Hungary, they have totally different approach to immigration that, for example, Sweden and Finland have.
Eija-Riitta, did you have a comment?
Yeah, short comment. I think it's noteworthy to understand that so far we haven't had climate refugees actually, and we have to be careful with that concept, because easily climate change can be a euphemism for bad management or bad governance. Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's very, very different perspectives raised, and we appreciate that. Veera, you still have
Yes, I would like to add one more thing that is really important to keep in mind when talking about immigration, is that it's a topic that is like, there's a lot of like right-wing propaganda and things that go with it, that are like these anti-democratic forces, and we should be mindful of that and stand behind the common values when talking about immigration.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So moving on. In the past year, Finland has struggled with the instrumentalization of migrants, causing an influx of asylum seekers to the European Union's eastern borders. Now, the sitting EU Parliament has signed a EU Migration and Asylum Pact. So, we would like to hear your opinion on whether the European Union should have a common stance, and if yes, then why and what the stance should look like.
For migration, and perhaps Timo, you can also answer since we discussed this already in the previous question for most other candidates. But Timo, Dan, Pinja, and Eija-Riitta, if you would still like to comment.
Please, can you please repeat the question?
Yes, exactly. So, we would like to hear your opinion on whether the European Union should have a common stance on migration and what the stance should be like. And välineellistä maahanmuuttoa is what we are.
You know, this, you don't have very small questions.
Yeah.
I think this is kind of a problem, or the way things are, that we have to have some common stance on these questions. And maybe in 4 years we have had this discussion in Finland that okay, it's just a Southern Europe's problem, but or is it a problem at all? But when we see this thing on our eastern borders now, I think we also in Finland understand this is a thing that have many sides, and I believe that if we can have some political lines together, they of course they can't go on the national over the national policies, but if we have the right top lines, this is a good policy, and I do agree, I do support this political package that's been made in Brussels.
Would Dan like to continue?
Sure, yeah, of course. I think it's important because if you have a sort of a free movement zone, of course you have to have common rules of who gets to become part of this free movement zone, who gets to move there. And it's just, I think it's just truly logical to have a common approach to immigration. This, however, has to be a common sort of approach, and you can't make that kind of decisions that gets other member countries to feel not included, because this can lead to sort of retaliation in different parts when making legislation and anything else. And what this policy should be, I'm not prepared to give exact policy statements on this point.
As people previously said in the previous question, I think it's important that there is a common policy for the EU, or more common policy lines on migration altogether, and of course this kind of migration would be under that as well. But I think at the discussion altogether, the securitization of the question, so seeing these kind of migrants as a threat, of course Russia is using these people as a threat, but it does not make the people themselves a threat. And if we, as a society and as a European Union that argues that is based on peace, free movement, democracy, if we suddenly, under a little bit of pressure, fold all of this and say like, oh, we actually don't agree with any of the rules we made previously. For example, there has been calls to renew the Geneva Conventions and related to that, and I think saying that they didn't understand what kind of world we live in today seems a bit weird. I did not live after the World War II, but I think it was a lot harder to live then than it is now actually. So I think we really have to pursue the values we say we are based on when we are going towards that policy, and I think we have to really keep that in mind.
Could you quickly clarify whether what you're talking about would be like legislation or like rules rather than the more value-based or stance
Well,
or
I
larger
think
frameworks?
rules and laws are always based on the values we make of them. So, for example, if we are more, so you cannot, for example, use the same kind of hybrid warfare if we are more prepared to take on people. So, for example, right now the issue is more like, oh, there's too many people. It's not necessarily that these people are dangerous themselves. It's that there's suddenly more than we are used to. So if we have the structures in place that are capable of taking in these people, if we are able to shoulder the responsibility with other EU states as well, then there is not such a hybrid threat that Russia now can use, for example. So I think these values and the rules are tied together in that kind of way.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to comment, or can we?
I was
Yes, Julia.
common stance on migration is certainly needed, but I think it's important to understand that this is a very complicated issue just because of this hybrid war possibility. It's part of the brain war. And I would like to say to you that if any one of you want to become a politician, you don't have to be afraid that normal political work would be this kind of rapid flash questions and answers. We need time. We need time when, if we really want to be good politicians, we need profound thinking. And it's okay to say that I'm not quite sure what is the best way to prevent problems, because we also know that among those people there are dangerous people. It's a fact.
Thank you. We appreciate that comment. Yes, thank you. It looks like our time is drawing a little bit to a close. However, we'd still like to look briefly at the future of the European Union. As we would like everyone to be able to answer these last few questions, I would appreciate if you could keep your answers to 30 seconds, and Lucas is here to remind you of that. Okay, so the first question is, the EU has many dimensions. It can be seen as an economic community, a defense community, or a community of values. Looking forward, which do you see as the European Union's most important role in the coming years? And this could be answered perhaps starting from Dan and going this way to Pinja.
Well, I would say, first and foremost, it's a community of values. There are common values that all EU countries share, and if you don't share these values, then it's very hard to be part of the same community.
Yeah, I also go with the values. It's a value-based community, but the way to leverage those values also beyond the EU and within is, of course, taking care of the economic power and also defense and industrial power. So I think those in a way go hand in hand, but it's very, at the core, it's about values. So that's what kind of brings EU together.
I see this more pragmatic way. It's an economic community which share some common values. I think they should share a little bit more. But pragmatically, it's an economic community. But I would like to put on the table self-sufficiency, taking a good position to the crises that we probably see in the future. Own food, own medicine, own protection, steadiness in the community.
The genius idea of Robert Schuman should be remembered, because he actually proved that it's not just value community or economic, but they are penetrating each other, so that the economy is the tool how to promote values, economic cooperation. This was the way how he made France and Germany to work together so that fighting would have become disadvantage for them.
I would say that we are a community that is based on shared values, and those values are things that we are really working hard on and ready to fight and protect them.
Yes, I must agree that I see EU as a community of shared values, because the values are also directing the kind of policies we are making, that we share the same future and want to make policies that are based on the same values, and what money is invested in, what kind of regulations we are making, for example, based on values.
Well, I think all of these are tied together, and you cannot really separate them, because what your values are defines what kind of economics you work on. I think if we want to work with the values we are saying around peace, democracy, we also need to change the way we work within our economy. If we want the future for the EU, we need to be more sustainable, take on more climate issues, for example. That is a question of defense as well. So I don't think there is a single EU of values, or an economic EU, or a defense EU, but altogether these are feel on each other, and they have to be looked at as a whole.
Thank you. And to the last and the final question of this panel. As we have a room almost full of people who are interested in politics and societal matters, we would like to hear from you some advice on how to enter politics as a young people, or otherwise imitate a positive influence on society. And this time we could start from Pinja and continue to the Dan.
Well, there are a lot of different ways, but one word I would say is organize. Whether it is joining a political youth organization, whether it is blocking the street when you're demanding a better future for climate, whether it is occupying your school, demanding better rights for yourself, I think find people who think common to you and organize with them.
Yes, my answer would be very similar. If you're interested in party politics, I would highly recommend going to some political youth organization. If you're interested in some specific matter, for example, whether it be animal rights or environmental issues, find an organization that does that and join that, go to demonstrations, etc.
Well, I would say the way that I started politics, I started with youth politics, and I think that's the best place to learn about politics.
If you find yourself in politics in a way or another, my advice is that ask questions. Never pretend that you know if you really don't know. The best way to learn things is to be honest and ask if you understand, if you don't understand. I studied theoretical philosophy, and that was the most important lesson I learned, that there are no stupid questions. If you don't pretend, you get much energy to learn.
At your age, I thought I'd never be into politics. My father was, so I got vaccinated against it. But I got interested, and I got very interested. And I believe you should start with reading. Read the political history, read the political parties' programs, discuss, make questions, be critical, and make your choice.
Yeah, first and foremost, I would say that stay curious and critical. But as a more concrete way, right now, the time around the elections is a very good time to approach politicians and parties, because everyone is eyeing for votes. So now is the time to go and ask politicians and parties questions. And if you feel that there is a political a candidate or a party that you feel kind of close to, then join a campaign. I mean, it's a very good way to see how politics is being made, and see into it without kind of taking too much commitment in there. So I think use this spring as a good window of looking into politics.
There's been a lot of good things said here, and I agree with a lot of them. I'll just leave with one addition, and that's politics isn't just about political parties, it's also about know-how. So gathering as much knowledge as you can and finding those questions that are important to you and that you find yourself interested in, and have the sort of stamina to really know. That's the best way to get engaged in politics.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you. We really appreciate your advice. And as Misa and I are thinking right now, and probably all of our audience as well, this has been absolutely amazing. And I would just like to thank all of you